Okay, looks like we're good to go. First of all, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for attending. We have a couple folks watching us via this Zoom link as attendees, and some other folks watching us directly via LinkedIn streaming live. Today we're going to be talking about a continuous discovery program. How do you build it? We expect at the end of this conversation to leave with some actionable and some new learning that we can apply to our team. So let's exchange, let's try to have some fun. Let's try to learn from each other. And I hope this is useful for everyone. We have some experienced guests here with us today. We have Lisa from Zapier, Shvi from LinkedIn, and Naren from Docusign. They're going to introduce themselves in a couple more minutes. I have just quick last messages before we can start. We have people from the Birdie team organizing the chat. So we're going to have a space at the end of the session for Q&A. At any moment, if you have some question, feel free to post your question on the chat area. They will organize and they will bring the questions at the end when it's proper. At the same time, for the ones of you who are attending via the Zoom link, the Birdie team will share some polls. So if you can spend a couple seconds to let us know a little bit better from your side, this is going to be awesome for you. So without further ado, let's start. I'm going to be your host today. I'm Pence. I'm one of the co-founders and the product lead here at Birdie. For those of you who are not familiar with Birdie, we are a feedback analytics platform designed to help product teams. Since our beginning, we have this vision to help companies getting to deeply understand their users, create products that people love, and this will create a higher and more positive impact on the user's life, delivering more value and creating more results for the companies. So we're in the business of automating and making customer-centric, data-driven decisions, continuous discovery possible and enabled by bringing user feedback. And we do that, and our technology is focused on two main pillars. One of them we call the feedback river, and I would like you guys to see and think about the feedback river as a constant stream of user feedback getting to your product teams every day, multiple times a day if you need, in a live stream, at every answer you get, in a survey if you need. So the frequency and the granularity that you need without all the effort and all the struggling that the product team sometimes need to deal with. So this is important for the team. And the other part that is our core technology is the AI models we use to help product managers categorize and tag everything the users are saying. So the important thing here is imagine you can do qualitative analysis at scale, understand tens of thousands of user feedback, collect those stories, find the opportunities, and create the experiments to deliver value based on every touch point you have with your users. Open-ended comments are the raw material for Birdie to work with, and we intend to make data analysis and natural language processing democratized and easy for product teams to use on a regular basis. So without further ado, know more about Birdie. Let's meet our invitees. Who wants to go first? Shvi, want to start? Please introduce yourself. Let us know what's your context with product discovery.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Shvi. I'm a product manager at LinkedIn. I work on our learning products and most recently transitioned, actually taking on a new area of focus on online jobs. So my, I guess, interaction with product discovery, obviously, we have quite extensive user research team at LinkedIn. I'm also a active content creator on LinkedIn. So I had the pressure and the privilege to interview Teresa Torrance. Sorry, recovering from COVID. That's why my voice is a little weak. I had the privilege to interview Teresa Torrance firsthand as part of the PM Learning series that I run every Friday. So got to hear from her, on some of the best practices and things that she shared. I love some of her methodology very deeply and hoping to implement some of them at LinkedIn and seeing variations of it. So excited to be here today and share, perspectives and learn from fellow panelists as well.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. And I hope you feel better from COVID. Thank you for being here with us in this moment. Who wants to go next? Lisa, Naren?
I can go.
Feel free to jump in.
Thanks so much. So I'm Lisa Orr. I am a senior product manager at Zapier. I also have ties to Teresa Torres. She's actually how I got into product management. I started out as a data scientist at a tech company, and she came into our company and coached 2 teams, and I got the opportunity to be a data person on the team and then became a product person on that team. And it's been fantastic, and I haven't looked back.
That's amazing. So Teresa Torres is a common link between all of us. That's nice. Naren?
Hey everyone, my name is Naren, and I've been in product at a few different high-growth SaaS companies. Most recently, I was at Docusign, where I led workflow automation and integration products. I've done discovery because I've led products in a variety of different situations, from launching brand new products from just a concept to scaling things that are already in market, enterprise products, mobile apps, integrations. So from my perspective, the principles of discovery are the same, but the way you go about it can be different. So excited to talk about that today. And on a personal front, recently a new dad as of a few weeks ago. So it is finally got a little bit of sleep last night.
Yeah, challenging, exciting. Right. Thank you for joining us and congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, let's try to do some warm up on continuous discovery. That is interesting to hear that different moments in different companies, different sizes and structures, different teams, people tend to see discover with different mindsets. I would like to ask you, what are a good foundations, key elements upon which you need to build a successful continuous discovery program? What needs to be there? What cannot be missing in a company that intends to implement a program for continuous discovery? Lisa, would you like to start this one? I know we had some different kinds of experience, so maybe in different scenarios you can share.
Absolutely. I have a background in academia, and then I was a data scientist, so I care a lot about data. And I think that continuous discovery is so much about gathering evidence and asking deep questions on if you're on the right track or not, which means you need to have criteria of success, which means you would need to have great access to data. And so if you can empower your product teams with access to user insights, then you're well on your way.
Sorry guys, I think my internet connection is broken a little bit here. Can everyone hear me well? Yeah? Yeah, you got on mute for a couple of seconds. So unfortunately, I couldn't listen to everything. Naren, anything to add?
Yeah, sure.
In terms of
I can jump in and
foundations?
add. I think it sounds really basic, but the first thing is acknowledging the importance of data and decision making. I think a lot of it is cultural, and also acknowledging that it's not just the product team, it's the product team, engineering team, marketing, sales. Everybody needs to be involved in this. And really then you have to start thinking about having something that you are measuring. A lot of times the data isn't there or it's hard to access. So if you kind of put those two pieces together, that's when you can really start thinking about a discovery program and building on top of that.
Yeah, those are good points. It's not a product matter. It's not something that PMs will handle by themselves. This is a multidisciplinary effort, right? So this is something we need to bring design, we need to bring engineering, we need to bring sales as a multi-point of view to create value. The other important thing is only by being closer to the users, understanding their context, understanding their real needs. It's about connecting, it's about collecting stories, right? It's about finding opportunities to create some solutions for real life real life problems, real life needs. Shvi, do you have some practical examples on challenges or pains or misconceptions? Maybe people understand wrong what discovery is.
Yeah, sure. I think I resonate with what Naren and you have mentioned about getting the team involved. It's not just the product or design's responsibility, right? You need engineering, data science, and marketing, and a lot of. I think two things I would say sometimes tend to get wrong when it comes to continuous discovery. The first is just the methodology of when to use a qualitative approach versus a quantitative approach, right? Like when you involve what and how the differences and the perspectives that they each bring at different stage of product development. So that is an easier to solve challenge, but having just the basic understanding and level setting across the team of when you would use a qualitative, smaller group user study to a large scale 100 people survey and what they're used for. Also, just the methodology of running a user discovery session, right? Like how you're not asking leading questions, but really going in depth to understand the context of how a user used a product and what a decision was made, and just learning the craft of asking questions and doing user research. So that's one category of challenge. I think those are easier to solve via training, education, but having the awareness of like the different tools and methodologies available and how to do them. I think the second aspect is actually the key is it's a continuous discovery. So I cover the challenges in discovery around the methodology and the tactics. But I think the continuous part is also a challenge in the end of like, a lot of times I think people get busy, and when they don't have the habit of continuously talking to customer and users on a regular basis, then I think majority team tend to do it upfront, like while they're thinking about what ideas to build, maybe doing some A/B test to validate if it's ideas right. And then that's about it. So like they don't actually talk to the user on a continual basis. The needs evolved, like what Teresa was saying, how maybe there's newer opportunities to explore, right? And right now, like with the macros, so many things are changing. A lot of things are constantly shifting. So like be able to, on an ongoing basis, understanding what's going on. I think, it's a new muscle that a lot of teams need to exercise. When you don't have the habit to recruit customer, to deciding on a question to ask, getting the team rally, then every time you reach out to a user, it's a new exercise that you need to do, and it takes a lot of activation energy. So how can you, with limited resources and time, building this practice, this habit of like continuously, right, engaging your user in the most impactful way that helps you decide what features to build and validate, is definitely something easier said than done.
That's good. When you mention knowing when to use qualitative versus quantitative feedback, Lisa, when do we know it's time to change? When do we know it's enough and we need to start measuring and prioritizing and sizing things that we just discovered? What are the signs for this movement?
That's a great question. I think the confidence in that you've covered the risk that you've identified is a really important factor. Trying to think of an example. I was on a product team where we were building COVID passports, something very near and dear to everybody in America. It's a year and a half ago, and there's the transition from discovery mode to delivery mode is all about, have you reached critical mass on covering the important risky assumptions? And especially with a new product, there is time to market is so critical that you can't spend too much time in discovery before making your first bet. And I think it's not just knowing like when to transition from discovery to delivery, but knowing that you have to, and that you need to make a bet. So instead of saying like, when are we going to do it? I like to approach it as, we have to make a bet soon, which is the first bet we're going to make.
Yeah, it's good. This connected with something that Shivi mentioned, have a clear goal, a clear expected outcome. We need to have a direction, right? The product team needs to have a direction in terms of building the steps towards this direction. And not only listening to the users and knowing how to capture value out of what they're sharing, but selecting those users. Not in how to select the users to interview. How do we define the criteria to bring the right people to listen towards a specific goal?
Yeah, I think of the whole thing almost as the scientific process where you have a hypothesis and you run a bunch of experiments to see whether your hypothesis is valid or not. One of the biggest sort of risks I see in the whole process and sort of a natural human tendency is confirmation bias, where you try to find, you just have your hypothesis and you try to find things that validate what you think. So that might lead you to sort of pick people that are going to agree with what you say and sort of give you that confidence that what you're doing is right. So really, I think the key thing is to understand who you're designing for and who your customers are. For example, whether that's account administrators, whether that's end users, whether that's the salespeople that are using it, whoever it is, understand who you're designing for, and get as many of those perspectives as you can, but also try to find people outside of that immediate radius, because you never know what insights you're going to get. So think of it almost like an 80-20 rule, where you don't want to just only focus on the, laser focus on those. Try to get a little bit more breadth in what you're doing, and look for patterns. You want to look for people that have used your app a lot and maybe stopped recently. Understand why. People whose usage increased a lot recently, maybe something changed in their business, maybe deals that closed recently and have included your product. Folks who have paid and are not using it. You want to look at support tickets. These are all signals for people that are engaging or their engagement has changed. And that's usually an interesting way and an interesting set of folks that you can go talk to get more information on your product.
That's good. Is it hard to get in front of users? Is it a complex process, bureaucratic?
I mean, I can just start from my experience. I think there's two parts to it. There's sort of the bureaucratic part of it. A lot of times it's not as bad as you think it is.
Yeah.
And the second is, the fear that, oh, well, they actually want to talk to me. And actually, I found that to be very overblown. It's usually my inhibition about not wanting to reach out to people because, I don't want to seem annoying. But most people actually want to talk to you, especially if you present it as a way where you can be part of giving feedback that's going to shape the future direction of the product. People like that. I mean, imagine if someone asked you, like, I would be open to talking about my experience and sharing what I know. So a lot of it is just don't be afraid, reach out to people, and you'll usually be pleasantly surprised with who responds.
That's good. Lisa and Shvi, different products, different user persona. I imagine completely different profiles between a Docusign, maybe a Zapier integration user, and in case of Shvi creating content, the users more like an audience. Do you see different scenarios in terms of selecting, defining, getting in front of user?
I mean, sure. I guess it depends. So LinkedIn Learning, for example, is 80% enterprise, 20% consumer. So, when you reach out to an enterprise in the B2B setting, obviously, you would reach out through your sales or your customer success manager. And then you sometimes have like voice of customer, voice of field programs. And so it's a little bit more structured. You might have charter programs where you work with a set of beta customer to, review work in progress design and idea and get their feedback. So it's a much more hands-on. And then on the consumer side, it's much more like member calls where maybe we give you a gift card of like, $50 or like a LinkedIn Premium or something, and then to entice you to kind of talk to us. Like Nareen said, I think most of the time the customers are actually wanted to help you make a better product so that it serves them better. So as long as, I think, unless you have like an established relationship like the enterprise, the B2B side, otherwise, you need it sort of deliver some value as opposed to burn out that relationship that you keep asking them for feedback and not able to actually deliver them. I think from the audience side, again, this is connecting with creators or connecting with my audience, then you can use much more democratic tools. of like setting up polls to understand, hey, do people, or even just looking at the post itself, you kind of you're able to analyze and learn, oh, do people react well, and what's going on there. It's not completely a straightforward A/B test per se, but those are some of the ways that you can collect, I think, feedback and signals in small and big ways.
Yeah. Different challenges. Go for it, Lisa.
Especially the call out on the B2B side and relationships and nerves on, having an impact on that relationship with a customer success manager involved. Those are all really important considerations. I'm going to use this example a lot because I think it's interesting and relatable, is the COVID passport concept. That ended up being a B2B to B2C scenario. So lots of players involved, all the way down to, people just trying to get into a stadium with this brand new passport. Getting access to all those players was its own interesting challenge. And sometimes it can be the persona you want to talk to is the customer of your customer, and they can be very protective. Like if you think a customer manager internally is protective, a customer and their customers, they can be very, very protective. So, leaning into value back is critical.
You have some good hacks in terms of trying to work around this limitation, this protection?
Yeah, it's like the mutual benefit. Especially if it's the customer's customer you're trying to target and they're being very protective, they will, a lot of the times your immediate customer will tell you that they know, that they've got the insights at hand and they can just give you the highlights, the cliff notes. But as the principles of continuous discovery, you really do want to get that raw information. You want to ask those questions directly to the person you're driving value for. So it has always been hard to get the customer's customer to come and talk to you, but you're just driving value home to your immediate customer.
That's good. Just a quick pause here to make sure. The Birdie team just shared the first poll. I'm not going to be repeating myself in every poll, just making sure everyone saw it and you guys had the chance to reply, the ones of you who had a couple seconds to reply. So we appreciate all the answers. This is amazing for us. A couple more still to come. Thank you for the time. So getting back to something, Naren, is there such a thing as different sizes discoveries, small discoveries, large batch ones, really important, revolutionary, and evolving current? Are they different?
I mean, I think a lot of it is judgment, and that's a big part of how you have to approach this. For example, if you don't always have the time to do this lengthy discovery process, and as Lisa said, time to market is super critical. You don't always have the luxury to just step away for a bunch of time and start from scratch, which is where this idea of continuous discovery becomes important. But I think coming back to the idea of judgment, like if you're changing, like a small checkbox on your page, you probably don't need to spend, a couple of months doing discovery versus if you're trying to launch an entirely new product area. So the way I think about it is the decision reversible? Is this, think about it as a science experiment, you have a hypothesis, is it a reversible decision? Then, okay, then you can make that a little bit more quickly with the data you have and move faster. If it's not, then you might have to take a step back and spend a little bit longer on that. But ultimately, and I think this was a point that was made earlier too, it's like, you think about it as a confidence interval. You have to be able to make a confident decision. Do you have enough data to make that decision and justify that to all of your stakeholders, both internally, and be able to communicate that to your customers about why you did? And if you feel like you have that information, that is sort of what defines the length of the discovery process.
Makes sense. I want to propose something and see how do you guys relate to this. Assuming selecting users, given a defined expected outcome and a business goal we need to achieve, and how to find the best opportunity to go there. The discovery process says let's go after the real life situation. Let's meet the user. Let's get their context. And sometimes we can discover things over there. How is it to document these learnings? How this documentation impact team rotation, new team members, new product managers getting the team to learn all the past experience and the past learnings? And does research records from previous initiatives, how they impact our decisions? Should we go back to something that we made 6 months ago? Because maybe we missed something, but maybe we can extract value out of it. So does it make sense, and is it worth to explore existing feedback to see if we can come up with something new out of it? At the same time, this connects with all the written background and how to onboard new board team members. I would like to listen a little bit each one of you.
Yeah, I think I can start. I think for me, there are a couple of things. First, documentation. I'm not super proud to say that like my team does a tremendous job documenting everything, but we try our best to list down, hey, here's all the former research, putting it together in a Google Sheet so that people can access to them, but it still looks overwhelming, right? And not like what Teresa was doing, like having this almost like a persona view and then always build on top of what's happening. We try to iterate different variations, like when we do monthly calls reviewing support tickets, that we can always build on top of like what's changing from last period and this period. So it's still a work in progress. I think documentation is always like takes time to do the extra effort, that 20% to make it like a collective knowledge, like this library. So every time you onboard, there's still some level of learning curve, I think. So that's number one, documentation from a process standpoint. The second thing I would say, a lot of this insight is not always like new and like changing. I think a lot of it is actually pretty consistent. If you do it well, human needs don't change that often, right? Like, yes, your feature can change, your competitor might change, they might like something more. Those are the dynamics. But I think if people are struggling with certain things, or if the job to be done is still, trying to look for a job or trying to post and close the job as soon as possible, trying to build some skill in limited amount of time, I don't think they change as much. So I think the continuous discovery aspect is actually continue to build that conviction of like, okay, we're heading down the right path, we're solving the right problem. And then yes, when macro environment change, you will also have a better sense of like the speed of change and how big of it's like a change it is that you need to really pay attention to. So I would say for me, continuous discovery is a confidence building exercise that you keep checking in and say, okay, we're on the right track, we're not too far away from what we had discovered before. So I say every time when you talk to a customer, it either reinforces what you discovered before, or there's probably 10 to 20% new stuff versus every time is a news. If every time is new, then either you're working on like crypto, for example, that changes all the time, which I still think there's fundamental needs that don't change, right? Or you haven't done a good job the first time that you didn't really discover a lot of this nuance insight. That would be my take.
I'll just add as a, the having evidence or, having these notes that you've gotten from calls and turning them into these insights that you're going to map together and prioritize and make selections against. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of documentation, keeping track of, but where, product leaders on the call who are, wanting to build a program for their product team, requiring evidence as part of a product team's pitch for what they want to put on the roadmap for Q1. If you're requiring evidence in the form of like, these customers have said that they need X, that they experience this pain, and we will be solving this pain by Y. If you require evidence, people will put evidence into their briefs if that's what you're using. So I think I see documentation fall off when evidence is not required by leadership. So I think that's a really good pressure. And then to Shivy's point, there's wonderful ways you can do the documentation, but if there isn't more pressure to do it, then random guesses will get on the roadmap too.
Anything to add on that, Narain?
I mean, I think they covered it really well. The only other thing I'd add is that I make a distinction between the data and the insights you get from the data. And I think a lot of times documentation, it's really hard to write down all of the insights you get, and that takes a lot of different time. So at the very least, just having all the data in one place where people can come access it just makes the learning curve much easier, where the other beautiful part is different people can come to different conclusions using the same data. And so as an example, we used to have a place where we just kept the spreadsheets, like weekly exports of data spreadsheets. At least you know where to get them. At least you know how to access it. You know, when you get a chance, you document, you put in the insights you get from there. That helps people come up to speed. But it also gives people the actual raw source data that they can then use for new analyses. Because, you know, over time, maybe you have a new idea, something has changed, but you want to go back and see how you arrived at those previous conclusions. At least you have the data that you can go back to. So I would just encourage, you know, finding a single place to kind of at least store some of that, or at least know where to go get it.
Mm-hmm. So this could help to validate the effects of some action we took. Maybe do some additional exploration, and something that Lisa mentioned, get evidence to justify some finding you did on a, I don't know, 20 people interview based. Maybe we can do that at scale or with more evidence if we can support that a large base of our users, they have the same necessity, the same need, the same thing. This would be good. This leads us to this point. Currently, how are you dealing prioritization and supporting the decisions you make? How to validate quantitatively the findings? What are the tricks, the tools, the process we're doing to validate, prioritize, and make the decisions, support decisions? Let's go, Lisa.
Man, so I've just started at Zapier. I've been there 3 months, so the cycle is not as set there. But maybe I'll reflect back to these companies. This is a validation of the opportunity. I maybe have missed the question a little bit.
About validating in quantity and support the decisions we make on the findings we do on the interviews in the qualitative exploration.
Yeah, so in the process of you have an outcome that your team is working to drive, and you've decided upon that with your leadership team that this is an important outcome, ladders all the way up to, if the company has a North Star, then you will have an impact if you drive this outcome. As an owner of that outcome, the product team going forward and building your set of evidence and your opportunity trees, the confidence in making your next steps and saying we have the right evidence to move forward with this solution is, I think, all about fundamentally asking what risks are we incurring with the proposals we have out there, and coming up with good enough tests to determine if these risks are if what we are moving forward with will overcome those risks. So I think it's I mean, I will always err to action over wait and learn more. And given especially with need to be fast moving, it is identifying fundamentally, do we have any, like, we can't go forward risks? Like, do we understand the product market fit is correct in this scenario? Are we the right movers in this space? That's a gigantic risk to make sure that you have covered before you make your first step. So if you get past that, then making a step is fundamental, and it's figuring out what's the most valuable first step, low risk that you can do that still is going to have an impact. And that is just a triage of a lot of concepts. So I, just to get more tactical about it, I think if you can get a concept in front of your target audience as soon as possible, and you can make it a this versus that test, you're gonna get a lot of great information. But I will always err to action versus wait a little bit more.
Wait and validate more. Yeah. So hard to make a successful program, right? So many different variables, the right mindset, the management and high-level management team needs to be completely in for the decisions. What absolutely needs to be in place in terms of processes and tools to be a successful one. If we would suggest and recommend the first steps for the folks who are here with us today, where should we start? What are the things we should build first, and what would a first cycle, a first experiment, a first end-to-end loop would look like? How to start simple, Naren?
I think kind of going back to first principles is show people the importance of data and pick a small project to start small and show some wins. So a really simple example is, let's say you have an application with minimal telemetry. Just build in a couple of additional events and get some additional insights that you might not have otherwise, like create a simple funnel that didn't exist before, just the most basic possible thing. And that'll let you prioritize, because ultimately one of the big risks is that you don't want to go into this saying that, you know, that's only valuable if I have every single piece of information and I can put it together and tell a story, because then you're gonna get into analysis paralysis, and you're gonna start saying, I need this data and this data from this system and this data from this system, and it turns into a whole different project, and you know, you just lose the forest for the trees at that point. So start small, pick a simple win, get something implemented, get some data, build from there, and then show the business value of that data and how having that data enabled you to make a better decision, and then find the new data sources you need and incrementally build from there.
I also think that depending on the stage, like, right, if you are, let's say, in a pre-product market fit phase, whether you're at a large company working on brand new product, or you are startups trying to look for your product market fit, I think it's just, think of it like a way to validate and learn as fast as possible. I really like the exercise in the book called the assumption testing, you know, to validate risks around 4 product areas. Martin Kagan has this famous one as well. Actually, I think it's 5 risks, but the first risk is value, around like, are you solving the right problem for the customer, right? Like, how can you build conviction that this is important enough a problem that they're willing to pay for it? You're not just, you know, delivering if you're delivering a candy product, and make sure it's delightful. If it's vitamin, then, you know, it might be a harder sell. So validating the value that you provide to the customer. And then the second aspect in the risk assessment is usability. But I think usability actually come in two risks. And it's so important that I almost wanted to separate them. I think one is discoverability. A lot of us just assume people will think about our product top of mind when they have a problem, right? Why? That's a big assumption, right? And then you'll think about people will discover you, people will come to you, you know, and things will just work. No, like a lot of work needs to be happening there. And then the third aspect is, like, once they come to your product, how do they intuitively figure out, you know, how to use your product and get to, like, not drop off from any part of that experience to actually experience the aha moment, right? So the usability aspect. And then, like, the viability, like, even if you can deliver, let's say a 10x experience, can you do it in a financially viable way? Is it actually feasible, the last risk, to actually build a reasonable cost? What will be that one killer feature you would star versus bloated your product with 20 things because all this customer tell you and they want this and want that, and like, you're going to get more frustrated and overwhelmed by what you heard than being productive, right? So I think starting lean and small and quickly validate, well, how can you learn the fastest? Fail fast and fail early actually do not take a lot of effort, but it takes a lot of discipline and the awareness and knowledge of, like, hey, a lot of that assumption, we can just write it down and then figure it out as you talk to people to validate that. And obviously you might need to cast a wide net first to learn a lot of that stuff, and then you then converge. But a lot of this could be done, I think, in a fairly fast and low code or / no code way. I think those are the key for people who are early on. Once you're getting more and more mature as you're optimizing an existing product that have found like some sort of product market fit, I think it's about getting disciplined about aggregating all the different things you hear from the field, being able to quantify, if 100 support cases is related to this, then you need versus like 75 related to this feature. Then that's very important, because you don't get bias over recency. Because when you talk to someone, if they say, or if they're a big customer, then the recency bias might have you think like, oh, this is a really important problem to solve. But if you look at historical data, hey, only 5 customers have mentioned about this, mostly concentrated maybe on large account. What's their percentage of spend with us versus some smaller account? So you need to get that sensitivity in like, how important is this problem? How big is it is when it comes to like scaling and optimizing a product. So at different phase, I think the approach would slightly be different.
That's good. Lisa, when you mentioned if the structure starts to demand numbers, demand quantity, demand evidences to support that, how would you think having numbers to support and having the environment, having the infrastructure, the frameworks or the tools to collect this information can help promote the relevance of the product teams and the product managers in terms of making decisions, in terms of doesn't have to disprove feature ideas and having to work backwards to redo the product roadmap? How can this change the routine and the work of a product team?
Yeah, if you have great access to internal user behavior is critical. Noreen called out earlier, if you're going to target somebody like who's a big user of the platform, what kind of signals can we derive? If you have access to revenue data, to user data, and you can tie fundamental components of business information together, you can draw for leadership your line, your projected line of impact all the way to that North Star metric, if there is one, or at least like the revenue goals for the next 5 years. You can create your metrics tree and have a conversation about, hard data that shows your impact as a product team on the company's bottom line. And I think it's a really fun, creative exercise to draw that line and the different metrics in between. And then when you can agree upon, if we move this lever, it will drive potentially this much revenue, then you can get a lot of excitement behind you from leadership and from fellow product managers. And I think, especially now that I'm at a bigger company, it's not just you working in a silo as a single product team. There's so much interwoven opportunity amongst your own team and others. And having this body of evidence that's not just I'm making a customer happy, I'm making them happy and I'm driving revenue for the entire company. Then when you're bleeding into other roadmaps and they're bleeding into yours, it's a really exciting, everybody gets excited about numbers going up and to the right. That's
amazing. Thank you for that. Folks, I think we're approaching the end, the wrap-up moment. We did receive a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to bring some of the interesting and different from the topics that we approach here. I would like to something that when I want to bring, constantly interviewing product users is indeed powerful. How often do you interview non-users or even users from the competition? How does interviewing not our current users is important or relevant to making decisions and we discover with different people? Do we have any real experience with that? Something interesting to share? Shivy? Yeah.
I think it depends on prioritization again. I would say if your product is at a phase, especially pre-product market fit, where people are not coming to use you, that's an important segment to interview, right? When you are at a phase where you have found some product market fit, people want your product, but maybe they're not sticking around, or maybe there's some frictions inside a product, then you might want to shift your focus to, making sure you optimize for that. So I think it's a matter of prioritizing and knowing, what stage you are, what type of product feature. So if in a large company, you could have people interviewing people who are not using certain features. Like, for example, for LinkedIn, it would be first live workers, right? Someone who's like a doctor or truck driver or whatnot, like what would take them to use a product like LinkedIn. Whereas you have teams who will work on people who are using us, but maybe not use it as much, or use it for the feature that were like not intended for us to use. So I think that's how I would approach it.
Naren? Any experience?
I think I think the way I would also look at it, just to build on what Shivy was saying, is that you don't, just be careful the types of questions you're asking, in the sense that, like, you don't want to go in and just like build what the competitor is doing. Like, you don't want to just go down the path of like, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And like, it really have to have a perspective going in of why you're interviewing the competitor's customer, and kind of understand, is it to find gaps and really focus on what those gaps might be? Is it to find out what they love about it? And also just be transparent about what you're doing. I think it'll serve you better in the long term to just say, hey, I'm looking into this space, thinking about, X and Y problem, Y, and I noticed you're using this solution, and just try to understand, don't try to hide the fact that you're, that you're exploring that area. And for the purposes you're doing, I think it's about building a longer term relationship with that customer.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's try to do one more here. I'm getting questions about how does UX researcher work on your current companies? How does the UX research go into the discovery process? What's their role, assuming it's a trio or a multidisciplinary action? How is it happening right now?
I have this experience right now, and it's so exciting. I've never gotten the opportunity to work with the UX researcher before. And so first off, it's amazing. But it's also, it is such an overlap with our own goals as a trio. So we have the trio, and we have UX researcher that we get to leverage for at least a quarter. And the way that we've decided to split things up is the trio is focused on near term. What's the first thing we need to deliver of value? And we're leveraging this amazing UX researcher, Bronwyn. She's focusing far out. Like, what are the big questions? Like, we have this vision for where we're going, and she's tackling the big risky questions about that. And she's even tapping into not even just our customers, but out in the market, trying to talk to people who have experienced solutions that we're aiming towards. So it's fantastic. If you have access to a UX researcher, my goodness, congratulations to you. I'm loving it. It's, I think, rare, at least in my experience at a company. But yeah, our division is, we're thinking near term, she's thinking long term, and we're bringing it all together.
That's amazing. So 2 different tracks addressing the basic research to set the foundations on top of which we're gonna do future discoveries. Any different experience than this one, Shivy, Naren, to share?
With user researcher? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's truly a pleasure to work with them. And there's different types of user research. And they're different from designer, right? Designer focus more on the actual UI, UX design, the interaction, the actual experience. But user researcher comes in 2 primary form, I would say, to simplify it. The first one would be the initial stage doing foundational research, is what we call exploratory foundational research. So those are a little bit more open-minded. I think what Lisa was experiencing, like the long term, like thinking through the journey, mapping out all the journey and emotional touch points, you know, using mirrors and stuff to illustrate kind of that journey and all the touch point. So that's the more or like outside of the product, actually understanding how they get their job done, right? Like talking through what that journey looks, what they struggle, what's the emotional, functional, social jobs that they're trying to get done. The second group of user researcher that sometimes we work with are doing usability study. So let's say you finally design an experience, you're in the process of development, and you don't want to just code it just yet and wait until A/B test to get the result. So we'll actually get a group of like 5 to 6 people, sometimes up to 10 in a room, obviously individually. And then some of them are moderated, some of them are unmoderated, meaning that you will have a user researcher who would show them, let's say, a new homepage design. And then ask this person, hey, tell us what you see on the screen, walk us through, you know, what you see. And then if we give them a task, let's say, can you find certain courses in this skill? How would you go about doing it? And then they would tell you, you know, what they see, where they get confused. You'll rate them on how difficult it is to complete a task. So you as a team, as a PM, you will work with the user researcher before to kind of design that process. But the user researcher has the skill kind of not to avoid not asking leading question, not telling too much, right? You're not supposed to educate how user use the product. You want to see their first reaction. Hey, this button doesn't make sense. I'm confused here. This is what I thought. So you get a lot more rich data point beyond like the A/B test clicks, right? And they're also cheaper to do because you only really need either design mocks or a clickable prototype. So then you can start doing this test and they will get you quick insights on where to revise your finding before you commit to code. So those are 2 primary ways of involving a user researcher.
Amazing. Pretty much complementary, credible, what how we can use UX research for foundation research. People, we're approaching the end of this session today. The only thing I want to say is thank you for all of the panelists, our guests. I appreciate your collaboration and the interactions we had here. There are a bunch of other questions we will make sure to address with you, and then go back to the people who made the questions and we didn't get able time to go over all of them. So if you guys can find a little bit more time to async, help us get the answers our audience needs, this would be good. For all of you in the audience, we shared a link for the waitlist on Birdie. So many of the challenges we discussed here today about centralizing, removing all the complexity and the effort in acquiring user feedback, connecting to the support tickets platform, getting server responses into a single repository where we can search, find, create filters and segments and see what people are saying, what they have to say in every touch point they have with our companies, making the voice of customer more than only addressing issues, but actually discovering opportunities to create value out of customer feedback and the voice of user. For those of you who are interested, we have a waitlist URL. You just apply to the waitlist and you can be an alpha and beta tester of our solution. It will be a pleasure to meet some of you there. And I think that will be all for today. Shvi, again, Lisa, Naren, thank you for the time. It was amazing. I hope to connect you two in next opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you.